Welcome, Sasha.
Hi, Kimberly. It's so nice to be here with you.
It's such a treat to have you on the show, and I'm so excited to talk about all of the things because you and I have been talking about them privately for quite a while. So this will be
Yeah,
fun to share.
we go back a long way.
Yes, we do. So, and I've got my questions over to the right, so I'm just going to be popping over here from time to time. But I'm curious for you because there's been a lot of changes in your life, particularly career-wise, as you mentioned before you started recording. So, what would you say, like, how has your perspective really on life in general, on all the things shifted in midlife?
I think I've reprioritized a lot of what's important to me. So I've gone back recently to freelance writing full time. So that's a big change because for 13 years, I ran a strategic communications company, and that was great and wonderful. But my original career, my profession and passion was always writing. And so I wanted to get back to that, which is something that I started to do this year. And I think in terms of prioritizing my time and what brings me joy and really trying to hone in on those things, I think is something that I do more now than ever before, I would say.
Yeah, prioritizing.
Time and joy and just doing things that bring me joy or just help me feel better or help others. All those things come together, I think, more in at this time of life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm less distracted by things like getting that next job or getting the next client. All those things are and were important, but I just think that they've become less important as I've gotten older.
Yes, that's definitely something I'm hearing from people and experiencing myself that it's more about how do we appreciate what's around us versus climbing for more in the same way we
Exactly.
did maybe when we were younger.
Yes, the ambition part of my brain has really quieted down a lot.
Yeah. I picture like a little dial and it's just gone down a
Down,
bit.
yes, down a little bit.
What would you say has been most helpful for you, Sasha? And of course, we're recording this the day before Menopause Day, which you just told me about before we started recording. And I know this will come out later. What has helped you with navigating all of the changes that come with this stage of life? And I mean that more like physically and mentally, even.
Yeah. So I started to really experience perimenopause in about 2018, 2019. So that's going on 5, 6 years ago. And out of nowhere, I was getting hot flashes. I was having these crazy mood swings. I knew something was definitely going on. And I know enough about health and wellness to know that I was in perimenopause. But what was lacking at the time was there were not a lot of resources and information out there. So what I did was I found a community of women online that was a great support to me. I found books, educated myself about this time in life, and those were really lifesavers. And then over the past 5 years, I've adjusted things like my diet a lot, especially recently. I do a lot of exercise, a lot of walking and weightlifting, but trying to lift heavier all the time, but still working on that. And meditation, which has always been the foundational practice that I've done for most of my life.
Yeah. So what changes in your diet have you noticed?
So I just found out that I'm on the very lowest end of pre-diabetes.
Oh,
That it's not so much that it was a wake-up call because this happens to a lot of people in middle age. They doesn't matter what necessarily their diet and exercise routine is, they just get into that range of pre-diabetes. And it doesn't mean that you're going to get diabetes, but my mother had it later in life. And so it's certainly something that I'm concerned about a little bit. So that means cutting down on sugar, obviously, increasing protein, cutting back or cutting alcohol out, which is going to be that's a challenge because I like my glasses of wine and champagne, but just making those little tweaks and adding a lot more protein, which you can't read an article these days without someone talking about how much protein we need. That's a little challenging because I don't eat red meat, and getting protein from other sources is a little bit more challenging, but it's doable.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. What would you say? Do you have a particular number you're trying to get with protein? Because I know it varies in what we read, but like, what are you finding?
I've read everything from 50 to 100 grams of protein. I can get to about 60 without too much trouble, but I can't imagine getting up to 100. I'm also quite small, so you have to
Mhm.
factor in your weight and your lifestyle and all those things. And yeah, everyone has a different calculation for what it should be, but I think about 50 or 60 grams of protein.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
It's Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of times people can feel like, oh, it's so hard to get that in. And yet, I don't know if you like at Trader Joe's, they've got pea protein that I love to add to my smoothies. And it's tons. I want to say 20, don't quote me. And
yeah.
then I get these little matcha drinks. I'm blanking on the brand, but it's 12 grams of protein in this little and vegan. So I don't know if it's oat milk or almond milk. Anyway, I'm not sure. I can't remember what the protein source is that's in there. It's something that's quite big for a little baby bottle to have 12 grams.
Yeah, smoothies.
Amazing.
Absolutely. If you like smoothies,
Uh,
protein powder is great. I have switched from almond milk to soy milk because it's got
yes.
a ton more protein in soy milk and it's also better for the environment. So, yeah,
Totally. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I love to do soy when I can because it has so much more protein.
it does. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, even more than all of them. Yeah,
It
all the
does. You get a
non-dairies.
lot of bang for your buck with soy milk. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I will, listeners, I will put, because I have it in my refrigerator, the matcha drink, because it's a brand you can get at your local grocery store, even like CVS even carries it. But they have different versions. And but I love the matcha one. And it's like a meal in a little bottle. So
I think I've seen those. I think they say something on there about protein,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
If you can get it at CVS, I've definitely seen those. And
Okay.
the only thing I would say to watch out for, especially with those kinds of prepackaged drinks, is the sugar, because a lot of
Yes.
them have pretty high sugar content.
Totally. Even the juices, right? You're like, oh, good, I'm getting a great little mini juice
Yeah.
prepackaged, right? Suja, any of those that you can get anywhere now, which is so lovely. But you're like, oh my gosh, there's 35 grams of sugar, but it's the pineapple and the apple. The stuff that
Yeah.
makes it taste good, right? That,
I
yeah.
haven't drunk juice in many years for that very reason. Just it's
Really?
yeah, I'm not a
Yeah.
juice person. I'll have a fresh
Yeah.
squeezed orange juice
Oh,
once in a while I'm
yes.
on vacation.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's whole fruit for me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny you say that, like I'm salivating. You just said the fresh squeezed orange juice. It's like a drink, it's so good. And it is just orange juice, right? In France in particular. But it's like drinking candy. It is so good. And the
A
little
treat.
pulps. Yeah, it's a
Yes,
total treat. Yeah.
absolutely. And in France, it's interesting. You've probably noticed this before, but every single grocery store, every little corner shop has a fresh orange juice machine that you can make your own.
Yes.
So it's big. It's big in France.
It's so good and it's so yummy. Oh my gosh, I am so salivating just thinking about it. I'm curious too in midlife how creativity and passions in general have shifted for you, or if you've developed more. Sometimes people pick up crocheting or something along those lines.
I have to say, I'm not a particularly crafty person, which is unfortunate because my mother was a wonderful artist, but I did not get the visual arts gene. But lately, I've been, and don't laugh, I've been getting into baking cakes, but I'm doing the very easiest kind of cake, which is a bundt cake. For whatever reason, I just decided to take out my old Silver Palette cookbook, which is a cookbook from the 80s that you may or may not remember that my mother used like all the time. And I made a lemon bundt cake the other day and it was really good. Gave it to a bunch of neighbors who were excited. So I find that very relaxing. I wouldn't call this a hobby necessarily, but I've been enjoying, and this is such a middle-aged thing to say right now, but I have really been enjoying birds and just walking around the neighborhood and seeing my little goldfinch friends. And there was a hawk in our backyard yesterday that was incredible. It was sitting on our fence, looking around for probably a little tiny bunny to eat. So yeah, those are nature and food always play a role, I think, for me in my level of enjoyment and relaxation.
It's so funny you say that birds like how we don't really pay attention to them as much when we're younger. But as we get a little older, we're like, oh my gosh, it can become, we have a little bird feeder and then we get to know them and we have little suets out, which I don't know if you know what suets are,
Yeah.
but yeah, okay. How would we even describe that to listeners? It's compressed, yummy stuff for birds.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It's compressed yummy stuff for birds. Sounds perfect.
But it's
Um,
wonderful to have. Yeah.
we do. I don't know what it's like it's a light switch that flips when you
Yes.
turn 50 or something. And all of a sudden you seem to notice birds everywhere. And my mother always loved birds and I never got it like back when I was younger. And now I completely get it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's really fun to be like, oh, that's a goldfinch or that's a blue jay. I know most people know blue jays, but yeah, to be
They're
able to
gorgeous
really
though. They're
gorgeous.
they're so pretty. And we had a woodpecker in our yard the other day, which I love. They're just fun to watch and very pretty. So
Yeah, yeah. So bun cakes, I like that.
yes, I'll bring you one next time I see
Yes,
you.
I
I'll
would
bring you a
love
little
that.
one.
They probably have little teeny ones too that you could
They
make,
do. They have
right?
little baby bunt pans. Maybe I
Yeah,
should stock up on a couple of those as well.
yeah, that's
Super
fun.
easy, super, super easy. And people think it's a lot harder than it is.
Yes, yes, yeah. But it is fun whenever you figure out like how to like certain things and they become your specialty of sorts.
Yes. Yes. I would love to be known for something. I don't know what that will be.
Hot cakes.
Fun Cakes by Sasha.
I love it.
New
Well, and
business.
huh?
A new business.
A new business. Yeah. Like you need another one. But
Right.
yes. One of the things you mentioned earlier, France with the fresh squeezed orange
Yes.
juice. And I think of France with like regard to pastries and bundt cakes and things like that. One of the things that I know about you is that you are hoping and planning and writing about a potential move to France. And so, can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because I think there's a lot of people that are really interested in making pretty big lifestyle changes like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you wake up one day and you go, oh, I'm not 25. I'm not 35. I'm not even 45 anymore. I don't I don't have that much time left on this planet. And it's really eye-opening. And I've been feeling that intense pressure for the past few years. And my husband and I have been going back and forth to France since we went there on our honeymoon in 2013. And I've always been a Francophile. My husband studied French in college. We love spending time in France. And we would always go over in the summer for a couple of weeks. But at the time, for many years, in fact, for our whole marriage, we had animals up until a couple of years ago when sadly all of our little fur babies crossed the rainbow bridge and we found ourselves empty nesters, so to speak. And we looked at each other, and this was after the pandemic, after going through that really intense and stressful time, and said, what do we want to do with the second part of our lives? And we both agreed that we wanted to spend more time in France. So we've been working towards extended periods of time there. So the first time we went for 3 weeks, then we went for 6 weeks. Now we're going for another six. Actually, no, we went for 2 months. Now we're going for another 6 weeks. And we're exploring different parts of France to see where we might want to ultimately either buy a second home or retire down the road. And we're dipping our toe in this adventure. We're not ready to just pull up all of our stakes here and fully move. It's more of a gradual thing that we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. What are you just from a bureaucratic standpoint? It seems
Yes.
like a really challenging experience. But what would you say has been kind of the easiest and the hardest thing about it? Easiest, maybe, I don't know. You made the decision and you're both on the same page.
Yes. Now that's easy. And we don't have children. We don't have our fur babies anymore. And we're a little bit freer than some people who still have kids and maybe at home or whatever. We do, our families are here. So that's a consideration. And my father is 87. He lives 15 minutes away right now. And so we have to take those things into consideration. But yes, I think the hardest decision is just doing it and actually making a plan and saying, we're going to go this date and we want to accomplish these things. That's, I think, what stops a lot of people is taking that first step. And so I always like to say, take a small baby step and that will start to motivate you and propel you forward. And that's how it worked for us. And the bureaucracy of potentially moving to France is very overwhelming. There's all kinds of visas that we've been looking into. We've talked to some consultants about types of visas that are available to us. And I know that when the time comes, we'll be able to handle it. But I do know there's a lot of paperwork involved, and that can be overwhelming for a lot of people.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and it feels like a bit of a maze just from what I hear from people with regard to moving to Spain, France, Portugal, whatever. It's Italy.
Yeah, and
It's like,
there's a lot of misinformation out there as well. And I've joined so many Facebook groups of expats and wannabe expats, and everyone has a different story. So I'm trying to really only listen to the experts. So there's an immigration attorney that we've spoken to who really knows his stuff. And I would recommend that to anyone who's considering this, is to talk to an attorney, talk to an immigration specialist, and don't get your information from Facebook or social media.
yes. Yeah, I think that's a great reminder. And I'm curious because one of the things that you just brought up is your 87-year-old father.
Yes.
For many people at this age, we're dealing with aging parents and a lot of the things that come along with that. And so, how has that been for you, especially as you think about moving?
It's difficult because if he needed something urgently and something happened and was in France, it would obviously be very stressful and upsetting. At the same time, my brother's in New York. My father has a great support system here in DC, and he wants me to live my life, and I want to live my life. And so I'm not letting that be the reason that I don't take this journey. That's at least what I'm telling myself now. In practical terms, once, let's say, the house was all packed up and we were ready to go, things can really come up when you're in that situation. But for right now, we're moving ahead and trying to spend as much time as we can in France.
And I think you said the key word, support system, right? He's got a good support system. And I think that's the challenge as we get older is a lot of times we can lose that. So the fact that he has that is huge. And that probably allows you to feel a little
Yeah,
lighter also.
absolutely. That's one of the most important things in at any time in your life. And I think I want to just bring that up in terms of middle age, is that having a support system, spending time with friends, finding your community has been really a game changer for me and incredibly important for anyone out there. And I'm sure that a lot of your listeners are in middle age and menopause. That is something that I found to be the most valuable tool, is community and a support system.
And I think a lot of listeners will agree with you and may be wondering how, right? Because it's not easy when I hear this from younger clients, even or friends of just people who, once you're out of school and you don't have that set network, or
Yeah.
say you work from home, your first job, it's like
Right.
we don't have that same level of regular connection that we once did. How are you finding the building of community at this time in your life?
Yeah, it is difficult. There's no question about it. And I've been in DC a very long time. And if we were to pick up and move someplace new, I think one thing I would do would be to get involved in the local community. But for me, like I definitely met a lot of people online, even if it's Facebook or something else. There was a community called the Wolfer, which I was discovered when I was in the thick of perimenopause. And that was such a great place to learn all about what other women were dealing with. But I think Facebook groups, like the smaller communities on Facebook, have been great for me. I'm also in the process of getting my health coach certificate. And so I'm meeting some other coaches, and coincidentally, a friend's cousin down the street is taking the program as well. And so she and I have become friends. So I think part of it is just being open to it, being open to going out and having coffee with people and being proactive. And it's hard for a lot of people to be proactive and to get outside of their bubble. I force myself to do that. I really push myself. But in the end, it's what keeps me going, is having those connections.
Yeah, they're so important, but yet they can be hard.
Yeah, because everyone's busy and everyone's got a schedule, and scheduling with one other person, much less several other people, can be quite challenging. But it's worth pushing through those challenges and making it happen. And if I can just throw in like a little piece of advice, I would say that it's good to have like standing dates with people, like where you're meeting with someone once a month, or you're talking with them on the phone once a month or a couple times a month. If you have that regular date on your calendar, it can help keep that relationship strong, and also gives you something to look forward to, and it helps to put a framework around your schedule.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I've recently set that up with a couple of friends who live quite far away, and where we just get together and we'll catch up and then we'll do some writing, like solo, but we're just like working on, then we come back and we're like, how'd that go? And it's just, it's nice, right? So it's like a catch up, and yet it's also, let's like co-work or co-create together.
Yes, I think that's co-create is a great idea as well. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the kids call it body doubling or something like
Really?
that.
Oh, I have not heard that phrase before. But then again, I barely know any of sort of hip new phrases or musicians. I'm so out of it these days. It amuses me because I used to be like the queen of pop culture and knew
Yeah.
everything, and now I
Yeah.
know nothing.
It's so funny you say that. I learn a lot of this from my Gen Z clients, then I need to go and Google it. But then, secondly, yesterday I was buying one of those like impossible breakfast sandwiches at Starbucks, and Bad Blood was on, and like people were singing and dancing. I'm like, I've heard this song before. Who is it? I was like, is it Beyonce? I really was like, I don't know. And I came home, I'm like, Tim, who sings Bad Blood? He said, that's Taylor Swift. I was like, oh my gosh, like I should
Oh,
so know that.
yes, I did not.
You didn't know
No,
that either. Okay, good.
no, I
Good.
did not know that. And I still don't quite understand Brat. And I know Brat
Oh,
is like
yes.
so past, like it's already like overdone, but I didn't really understand that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whatever. I don't
Right.
really care.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't, yeah, I'm not, that's just not where my head's at right now.
Yeah. It's filled with other things, but it is funny when you're like a little clueless, but it's okay. That's
Yeah.
just like where we are. We were clued in 20 years ago, right? Or
I'm very,
30.
but I do learn a lot from my Peloton instructors. So I use the app religiously. And one of my favorite Peloton instructors is Matty Mijakomo. I think I pronounced his last name right. And he has great taste in popular music. And I learn a lot from just taking his classes.
I'll bet he knows Bad Blood is Taylor Swift, even if we
I think he
didn't.
probably does. Yes, absolutely.
I'm curious for you. You just mentioned Peloton. And so,
Yes.
what are some of your go to self care rituals? Really, because you mentioned strength training, which, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, like 2, 3 pound weights are so hard for me. So, I'm just curious. Yeah. What is your overall, your rituals to really
Yeah.
take care of yourself?
And exercise is a non-negotiable and has always been a non-negotiable since the time I was probably 9 or 10 when I was doing Richard Simmons in our living room, and Jane Fonda, of course. So nowadays I go to Orange Theory usually, and that's where I do the weight training. And it's great because the instructors guide you through each of the exercises. It makes it a no-brainer. So that's a couple times a week. Then I try to get like between 4 to 6 miles of walking in a day. I'm still off the yoga bandwagon, or I've fallen off the yoga bandwagon and have not gotten back on it, unfortunately. But hoping to get back to, I think every time I see you, I'm like, I'm going to go back to yoga. And then it doesn't happen. So those, from an exercise standpoint, that's what I do. And then self-care, other rituals. I love a good bath. I know you're a fan. Meditation, as I mentioned. What else? I don't know. I like to give myself little treats when I accomplish something. Sort of the carrot. I dangle a little carrot in front of my nose. That could be a little piece of chocolate or watching my favorite TV show after I've done something that I didn't necessarily feel like doing. Yeah, those are just the little things that make my day a little brighter and a little bit easier to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. We all need those carrots, right?
Yes. And podcasts, I will say that as well.
Ah,
Podcasts truly got me through the pandemic. I would walk around our neighborhood for hours listening to a lot of Rick Steves because of all the I'd listen to all kinds of travel podcasts because that way I could get outside of the 2 mile radius of my house, dream about traveling again. And I just found podcasts a great way to get information on all kinds of topics. There's just so much out there about midlife and menopause right now, which I love. Two of my favorite topics. Yeah. So those are a couple of things I like to do.
One of the things you mentioned with regard to yoga is I do, okay, a few things is I can't believe what I used to do with yoga because
Yeah.
my body just cannot now. But is it that it can't or that it's just out of practice with it? Right.
Yeah.
And I do think we get to a different phase too. Like now I really love yin yoga and I always loved yin yoga, but I didn't really think of it as yoga, right? And so now I'm like, oh my gosh, I love it. And it's also incredibly hard. But I do think
Yeah.
our physical activity, it shifts and
Absolutely.
sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down, or sometimes it just goes horizontally in a different direction.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, you really have to listen to your body and not just push aside certain things. Yeah, there are things I can't do. I'm not as flexible as I once was. And I think that also, I think there's a little bit of more fear now. So I wouldn't do a headstand probably now or something like that because of just the fear of something cracking or breaking or God only knows what. But I think it's just about being in tune with your body and listening. If things hurt, you listen. Don't keep on trying to push through the pain and give yourself a break. Take a day off. All that kind of stuff, I think, is becoming more and more apparent to me as I get older.
Absolutely. As you were talking, I was just thinking, but it's so funny, like things didn't hurt at all when or at least when I was younger. And now it's like now everything hurts. But it is
Yes.
funny how like activity, like listening to your body, yes, but everything felt so good, especially hip openers for me. And so now it's been
Mm.
such an interesting twist of yes, you really do have to listen and you have to be careful.
Yeah.
All the things. It's so different.
Yeah. The one thing that I remember right as I was like 49, 50 is my feet. My feet, I would get out of bed in the morning and they would just hurt. And I was like, I don't know what is going on. And this happened for on and off for a couple of years. And I completely stopped wearing any kind of heels. I like Kamala, I'm a sneaker girl. That's actually stopped. My feet no longer hurt, but weird things will pop up like a shoulder or a back or your hips or what have you. And you're just like, I didn't even do anything yesterday. And I hurt. Well, what's going on? So yeah, it's an
Yeah.
adventure, right?
It is an adventure. Every day's different. Yeah.
Every day is different. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. It just makes me realize like how much I took for granted. Not that I was thinking, oh, in 20 years, this might be hard for me. Like that never crossed my mind. But
Right.
yeah.
You were doing it to the nth degree all the time and doing extremely difficult poses and really pushing yourself. Yeah, I can understand how things have probably changed a little bit.
Changed a lot. Now, even a lunge is, oh my God, a lunge? Can I do a lunge? I couldn't do a lunge right now if you asked me to, and I'm not supposed to. Anyway, it's funny, right? Our shifts. And I think one big word that comes up around it is acceptance, right? The having to accept of like these changes.
Yeah, accepting, but also realizing that you're in a different phase of life and accepting, yes, but also I think there is still a part of me that wants to push myself. So I'll give you an example. So I was never a runner. In fact, I hated it. I was always the last girl around the track in school. But during the pandemic, when gyms closed, I needed something to do. So I did take up, I will call it jogging. I'm not even going to call it running. And I still run off and on at Orange Theory and that kind of thing. And so I would say that actually, from a cardiac endurance standpoint, I'm probably in better shape than I was in my 30s and 40s. So I think you should and can push yourself, just not to the point of it hurting. But no, I
Yes.
think a lot of it is a mental game, just feeling like you can do something versus having those mental blocks that you can't do something. I think is something that I've worked through a little bit also in this age. I've pushed myself to do things that I didn't think I could do when I was younger. I told myself that I couldn't do certain things. And so I don't know. There's just a lot of yin and yang, a lot of push and pull in this time. Yeah.
Yeah, there is. And I appreciate you sharing about the running. That's really impressive because
Yeah.
running is so hard on knees, on so many joints. And yet, many people in middle age are still like running and marathons and what have you, or even just around the block, which is impressive because it's not easy for everyone's
No,
body. Yeah.
it's not. And I was reading an article recently about repetitive activity.
Yes.
And apparently, or not surprisingly, really, anything that you repeat over and over and over again is bad for you, whether that's running or sitting. So I guess
Hmm.
the lesson is mix things up,
Hmm.
have a lot of variety in your
Hmm.
physical routines. And that's a good recipe for avoiding injury and that sort of thing.
Was that in the Times by chance?
Probably was. I think it was this week sometime.
Yes. I
Yeah,
saw it.
I
I
think you
saved
did.
it. Yes.
Okay.
So, listeners, I'll put a link in the show notes to the article, but I
Yeah.
think it was the New York Times or maybe it was CNN, but those are the two ones
It was either
I
the
go
New York
to.
Times or the Post. I don't
Oh,
read
okay.
CNN because it stresses me
Okay.
out.
Okay. Okay. So I'll look in on the post also just in case. But yeah, no, it's a great reminder that, yeah, doing all the things that are good for you, even just over and over again, how it does cause stress, obviously, on the body, and we need rest days, etc.
Not to mention, it's also good for the brain to do different things. It really helps keep you on your toes. And so that's another thing to keep in mind is that getting outside of your routine, which is not easy. It's not easy for me. I'm a very routine oriented person, but I think that's why I really like travel because you get outside of your comfort zone and you have to adjust and change the way you do things. So it's good for your mental well-being as well, at least
It
mine.
is. Yeah, no, totally. What's funny is someone that I was just in Paris with said this, and I love just based on what you said. They were like, I always look forward to going. When I'm there, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. Just getting around, like just the basics, right? The temperature isn't the way you wanted it, whatever it is, right? Traveling is hard. And
Yeah,
then when they get back, they're like so nostalgic about how wonderful it was.
absolutely. Yeah.
I was like, I love that pattern because I get it. And I think many listeners can too, of just travel is not easy.
It's not unless you're specifically going someplace and laying on a beach. But if you're
Right.
navigating a city or a new place, your brain is working overtime, especially if
Gosh.
you're not in a place where you speak the language. So, yeah, it's good. It's good for us. And there's just another article about how travel keeps you young. So, yeah,
There you
all for
go.
it. I'm all for it.
Okay. Forward that one to me also, and I'll include it in the show notes.
Okay. Great. We'll do.
I'm just thinking as we end, because I feel like I know your goals for the future with regard to moving to France, but is there anything that you want to say about dreams and goals for the future of where do you picture yourself maybe in 10 years?
In a dream scenario, living a beautiful life in France, having just finished a book, or finished writing a book, I should say, that would be a goal with my husband and maybe some little fur babies joining us. That just living a simple but beautiful life with a lot of friends and family around. I think that's what I aspire to.
I love that. I see that for you
Thank you.
with bunk cakes in the future
Oh yes, of course. How can I forget? Bun cakes everywhere.
everywhere. My last question for you, Sasha, is the name of the podcast, Tranquility du Jour. And I think you've shared a few of the ways that you are finding tranquility in your everyday. But I'm wondering, as we think about tying in the beauty of what you love about France into everyday life, how does that help you find some tranquility and what do you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that you and I talked about art de vivre, the art of life, living. So incorporating things like I see your beautiful flowers behind you, having those little things that bring you joy. So whether it's flowers or a soap that you love, I love kind of any bath product. So that brings me joy, beautiful music to listen to, little things that make your environment more cozy and special, a lovely blanket while you're snuggling up on the sofa and reading. All of those things are kind of part of the tranquility that I try to bring into my day-to-day life. So, and honestly, things are tough now. I don't want to discount how difficult the world is right now. And I put myself on a bit of a news diet. And that's something that is important for people's mental health, is to be able to take a break from the news cycle and all the terrible things going on in the world, and not just stick your head in the sand, but sometimes you do need a break, and it's okay to do that. So I would just leave on that note.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here
Yeah,
with us today. It's a
thank
treat to have you
you.
on the show.
Thank you, Kimberly. Always a pleasure.